Hey guys, gonna do another recording for you guys. This time we're gonna go on over section 6.9, but we're actually gonna do it in two parts. So I want to show you guys first part one, which is solving right triangles using trig, and we're gonna focus on finding side lengths. And then part two, we'll focus on how to find the angles. Just slightly different. I think it would be easier to separate this into two videos than putting it all in one long video. Okay, so uh, 6.8, 6.7 dealt with introduction to trig and writing trig ratios. And now 6.9, we finally get to see how we use trig ratios to help us for a right triangle. And so here's my first example that I have written down. I have a right triangle and triangle ABC. I have one angle is 70 degrees. A right angle, you can easily figure out what this angle is right over here. Okay? From the information that I'm given that side BC is 40 feet. And I'm asked to solve for side AC. Okay? So that's my X right there. So this angle over here, 70, the angle that I'm given, becomes my reference angle. So I'm going to just quickly make that stand out just a little bit more by using a different color. So according to this as my reference angle, the sides that I have and the sides that I want. So from this reference angle, the side that I'm given of 40 feet becomes the side that is opposite. I am asked for the adjacent side. Okay. So if we have our three trig functions, so, ka, toa, okay. So of the three trig functions, sine, cosine, and tangent, which one of those trig functions is going to require or does require me to use the side opposite and the side adjacent? Okay. And once you figure that out, you're going to notice that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. I don't have the hypotenuse. I'm not asked to find the hypotenuse, so that's not what I want to focus on. So pretty much anything that involves the hypotenuse, we don't need. And that leaves tangent. So the way that we're going to set this up is this. The tangent of 70 is equal to the side opposite over the side adjacent, which in this case is x. Okay? And now we have a trig equation that is set up and we can use to solve for x. So the very first thing that I want to do now, and just so that way there's no confusion, I want to box tangent of 70. So I've seen people do some weird things where they're multiplying by just the 70. This is all together. So anything you do with it, you have to take everything along with you, the tangent and the 70. Okay. So now if we're going to solve for x, now I'll show you guys the longer way, and then there is a shortcut to solve for the variable when the variable is in the denominator. So we're going to multiply both sides by x, so we get x tangent of 70 is equal to 40. And again, I'm going to box tangent of 70 just so that way you guys don't do anything weird and separate things. And then get x alone, we're going to divide both sides by tangent of 70. So x is equal to 40 over the tangent of 70. Again, we're going to box tangent of 70. Now, this, you're essentially done, and all you have to do is just input this information into your calculator. And depending on the type of calculator that you have, that might be a little tricky. Okay? Now, if you have an Android device and you're using your calculator, it's pretty straightforward. iPhone gets a little tricky. If you have an iPhone, I actually recommend that you download a separate scientific calculator, one that actually shows you inputting the word tangent or sine or cosine into your calculator, because the factory one does not. And so it makes it a little bit trickier sometimes for you to know if you have the right answer or not. Okay, so now to finish this up, now I don't recommend that you input these separately, but just so you know, the tangent of 70 should be approximately 2.747477. So, and you want to use as many digits as you can, just so that way you get an accurate answer. Okay, but if you were to go ahead and you were to input this information in, you would end up with x being equal to 14.6 feet. Okay, and then I was asked to solve for AC, which is where my x is. I did, found out the length of this is 14.6 feet. So essentially here, we're done. And you would move on to the next one. So I will do a couple more examples, but I want to go over a couple key things. One is you have to know which one of the three trig functions you have to use. And two, you got to be careful when you input this into the calculator. Okay? Again, try inputting it all. That's what I did here to get my answer of 14.6. And most problems will ask you to round to the nearest tenth. Is generally where they ask you to round to. So that's why I did. Some of them, when we're in part two, when we're talking about the angles, it'll ask you to round to the nearest degree. So we'll do that at that point too. Okay? Let's try a couple more problems and give you guys some practice on this. So I'm going to leave those trig functions there. And so let's say we got this set up. Okay, so in this particular case, we have two variables that we want to solve for. And our reference angle now becomes this angle that was given to me. So everything is based off of that reference angle. From that reference angle, W is the side that is opposite, 10 is the side that is adjacent, and Y is the hypotenuse. Okay, so now we want to decide which one of the three trig functions we want to use. There's one thing that we don't want to do, and what I don't want to do is I don't want to use the trig function that involves both the opposite and the hypotenuse, because both of those are variables that I don't know. So I want to keep on using the adjacent side. Okay, so let's first solve for W. Okay, so which of the three trig functions uses the side that is opposite and adjacent? And we just finished doing that. You can see that it's tangent. So we're going to do the same setup that we did last time. And it's going to be the tangent of 54 is equal to opposite over adjacent. W over 10. And same thing that I did before. I'm going to circle that part, or put a square around it, rectangle, and let's solve for W. So this one's a little bit easier in solving. All I have to do is multiply both sides by 10. So we get 10 times the tangent of 54. And so when you go ahead and you put this information into your calculator, I already have my stuff written down, so it's a little easier for me. So, but the tangent of 54, you should have gotten 1.37638. Okay? Um, and then when you go ahead and you multiply that out, you end up with W is equal to 13.8. Okay? And so now I know the value of W. And we're done. We can move on to the next variable that we need to solve for. And now we want to go ahead and we want to solve for Y. So same process. Going to leave this on here for just a few more seconds, and then I'm going to erase it. And so now that I have W, notice here W is not a very nice number. It's 13.8. Just a nice 10 is a nice number to work with. So what you want to do when you're solving the next problem is you want to focus on which trig function is going to use the original value that I was given. This is an approximation. Okay, it was cut off, it was rounded. This 10, the original number I was given, is not a rounded number. So you want to try to utilize that value again in order to help you solve for Y. Okay, so when I do that, now I want to look for which trig function uses the side adjacent and the hypotenuse. So adjacent and hypotenuse, in this case we're going to use cosine. So cosine of 54 is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, 10 over Y. Okay. Actually, I told you on the very first problem that we did, I'd show you guys a shortcut when the variable's in the denominator, and I forgot to, so I'll show you now. Now, whenever the variable's in the denominator, the fast way of doing it is that these two values just kind of switch places. Now, you can cross multiply and do all that math, or you can just rewrite this as Y is equal to 10 over the cosine of 54. And again, just so that way you practice your calculator skills, cosine of 54 ends up being 0.587785. Or, once you're all done, Y is equal to 17. Okay, so and that's all you have to do on these problems. Okay, couple things to point out. Use your judgment. You should know more or less if this information makes sense. So hypotenuse is always the biggest side. So if I was working this out and I got a number like 12, well, 12 is not larger than 13.8, so then I know that I made a mistake someplace. So use that kind of judgment when you're going ahead and you're solving these problems. Also, sides should match up accordingly. 54 is larger than this angle over here, which would have been 36, 36. And so this side, opposite, should have been larger than that side. So use that kind of judgment or those kind of skills. Okay? So, I think we're good. Actually, I'll do one more example real quick. So, let's do this. Okay, so in this case, here's my problem that I have. 17 becomes my reference angle. And so we want to kind of pinpoint everything in accordance to that reference angle. So according to that reference angle, P is the side opposite, X is the side that is adjacent, and 28 is my hypotenuse. So let's go and let's go in alphabetical order. Let's solve for P. Take a second, think about which trig function you want to use in order to solve for P. So we have side opposite, and the other side that I have is the hypotenuse, opposite over hypotenuse. So we want to set this up as the sine. Let's be consistent with what everything else I've done. So we have the sine of 17 is equal to P over 28. And solving for P, we multiply both sides by 28. There's my box again, just so that way I don't separate things. Okay. We get 28 sine 17 is equal to P. Sine of 17, since I've been doing it for all the other problems, 0.29237. That's just for you to be able to check your calculator skills. If you go ahead and you put that into your calculator, you'll end up with P is equal to 8.2. Okay? And that would be it. Now we're going to do the same thing for X. Since this is a rounded answer or truncated answer, I don't want to focus on P or using the opposite side. I want to focus again using on just the hypotenuse, and in this case the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So again, which of those three trig function is going to use the side adjacent and the hypotenuse, and that's the setup that you go with. So in this case, we're going to use cosine. So the cosine of the angle, 17, is equal to side adjacent over 28. So similar setup as we had just used to find P, where it was the sine, quick cross multiplication. So we get 28 cosine of 17 is equal to X. Again, cosine of 17, just so that way you check your work, is equal to 0.9563. And once you are done, and you put that into your calculator, you end up with 26.8. X is equal to 26.8. Again, check, does that make sense? This is the smallest side, so it should have the smallest value. Larger leg, 26.8. Largest side of all, 28. Everything makes sense. Everything fits in there. Okay? And that is part one of section 6.9, where we have to solve for a unknown side length. Okay, given an angle in the right triangle using trig. So if you have questions, let me know. My biggest thing is using a calculator. Like I said, if you have an iPhone, I would download a separate calculator app. They don't take up very much space at all, so you don't have to do too much on your phone. Okay. I'll be back with part two shortly.